You're probably wondering how Ethan got into this situation. Cramming. Yep, you've done this before, I've done this before. You cram all night and then are surprised when there's that big glaring 62 under the exam grades. But just like an Olympic athlete, one night of track practice doesn't make you a medal winner. It takes a while of training to yield good results. If only there was an entire class that taught you how to train and develop your study skills. Let's talk about the basics. Why is cramming so bad? Why should you stop something that you've done successfully throughout high school? Well, this triangle is something that you may recognize. It's Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy shows the different stages of learning and understanding of material. Students are notorious for feeling overconfident in their lesson retention. Many college-level students fail to study past the remembering or understanding stage. This is where the struggle comes from. At this stage, it feels like you know the material, but in reality, you cannot actually apply what you've learned. Studying to this level may have been adequate in high school, but college requires a higher understanding of material. You must know how to apply what you've been taught and not just regurgitate it. When studying for an exam, or just in general, the higher you are on Bloom's taxonomy triangle, the better of an understanding you will have of the material. A better understanding also yields better application come test time. So how do you climb that taxonomy triangle? Approaching learning as a form of strategic and deliberate training will help. Key features of strategic training include a supportive environment, learning processes and practices, and reinforcement of training. These key features of training process can be applied to study habits and improve your cognitive transfer or application of learned material. Beginning with environment. It's nearly impossible to learn within an environment that is not supportive of learning. Simple actions of self-care, like eating well and a full night's rest, can affect cognition. Dedicating a place to studying also has a positive effect. Return to the spot anytime you want to study, as this will train your brain to associate it with learning mode. Quiet spaces such as libraries or empty classrooms may set the mood, and noise-canceling headphones or earplugs can help in louder areas such as cafes. How can you turn learning into an effective training process? The ADDIE model and gap analysis can help you form an effective training method. The ADDIE model is widely used throughout the training sphere. Its letters are an acronym for the steps that an effective training process has: assess, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. To apply this to your training regimen, you will need to assess that there is a need for improved learning. Do you have a goal? What is the motivation to improve and train? You can help yourself answer this question by doing a gap analysis. Gap is quite literal to its meaning, as it assesses the gap between your current learning point and your desired state. For example, you want to learn an entire chapter of math for that upcoming exam. A good method to assess the gap is to try problems in the back of the chapter. This will show what parts of the problems you can easily solve and which parts are simply unachievable. This process will form a goal for you to accomplish. There are many learning techniques that are effective, but the biggest emphasis is that you simply cannot learn it all the night before. An effective method to try is the 5-day study plan. This method utilizes spaced repetition, which incorporates reviewing material over a spaced amount of time. Study habits that incorporate learning and relearning have shown to be a lot more effective than mass learning or cramming. And let's remember, that's what got here in the first place, right? Another effective way to retain information is to mind map or connect it to things you already know well. The more mental connections you have with a piece of information, the more successful you'll be at retaining it. This is why mnemonics are a good memory tool. And of course, practice makes permanent. The more you study, the more likely you will retain what you need to know to ace that exam. Develop your study plan and stick to it. Using the 5-day study plan as an example, pre-plan 5 chunks of material that need to be learned as well as reviewed. Outline the daily learning goals and make realistic study expectations. Try your hardest not to fall behind, as discipline and time management are critical here. The first 3 letters of ADDIE can be completed in under a day and are a good foundation for the study process. Continuing with implementation, now is the time to use that developed plan and method to study accordingly. While this part may seem daunting, the aforementioned foundation is all that you need to be successful. Staying caught up with the developed plan will prevent catching up and cramming that caused that poor grade in the first place. The most critical yet overlooked step of the learning process is evaluating its effectiveness. There are billion-dollar companies who will spend money on training their employees but fail to evaluate if the training's having a positive effect on their bottom line. Learn from their mistakes. Most students would use their final exam as the evaluation method, but if Bloom's taxonomy has taught us anything, it's that students have a false sense of confidence and always feel more prepared than they actually are. Before that big exam date, test yourself. Retake the chapter questions you used in your gap analysis and assess the improvements. Were you able to answer those questions now? Were your goals met? And was that gap closed? Evaluating yourself before your big exam will show if your training was successful, pinpoint where improvements need to be made, and give you a justified confidence of your skills. The reinforcement stage provides structured opportunities for you to practice your new skills by applying them to your exam or in the real world. While this stage may be more important in corporate training, it's still worthwhile to remember the anecdote, you use it or you lose it, and see how it applies to your newly learned information. Your 3 years of high school French classes are a great example of this, and it's safe to say that you remember very little at this point if you didn't re-review over the years. It is important to go back and practice old information for this very reason, as reinforcement strengthens memory. You know, I heard our friend Ethan applied ADDIE and strategic training to his studies. I wonder how he did on that new exam. How do you think you did?
I think I did great job.
Good.
Thank you so much.
So to review, a successful study plan assesses the learning gap, designs a long-term study plan, develops a planned schedule, executes it, and then evaluates the results. Happy studies!